Hey, it's Renee from the Craft Table. Welcome to week 7 of our summer embroidery stitch along. This week we are embroidering the satin stitch. If you watched last week's video, then you know that the satin stitch is not one of my favorite stitches, but I hope that does not discourage you from learning the stitch and applying it in all the areas that you would like to. It is a very versatile stitch and it's relatively easy. And so you will see that today's video is not going to be that long. It doesn't take a long time to actually demonstrate how to stitch the satin stitch. It's mainly in where you apply the stitch. And you can do the satin stitch basically anywhere. It's a great filler stitch. And if you enjoy embroidering the satin stitch, you can use it just about anywhere. Since I personally don't embroider the satin stitch very often, you'll see that I'm not going to be demonstrating it in a whole lot of different places on the fabric panel. And that reminds me about the whole short video versus long video version. I haven't really talked about that, I don't think, since week 1. The reason why I am doing 2 separate videos, in case you're interested or in case you're just wondering, is because some people just want to get straight to the stitching and not hear me talk about what I'm talking about like right now, and whether it's my favorite stitch or not my favorite stitch and where I use it on the panel. A few housekeeping details. I realized last week that I haven't really been updating the playlist properly. I do have 2 different playlists for this summer's embroidery stitch along. So this is 2025 summer embroidery stitch along. And I have what I call the regular version, and then I have the short version. I didn't realize until this past week that I haven't been updating the short version playlist. That has been corrected. So that should make it easier in the future. If you're going back and looking at videos, you can just go to the playlist. There's also the summer embroidery stitch along from last summer, 2024. And there's a different playlist for that as well. And the other thing is, I didn't also realize until this past week that I was not responding to some of the comments that you had left on YouTube, on some of the past YouTube videos. I don't know when it changed. I used to get an email notification when someone left a comment on one of my YouTube videos, and for whatever reason that stopped happening. So I just didn't think people were really leaving comments, and I happened to be on there. I'm not sure why. Look, I guess maybe just making sure that a particular video was working, and I saw that there were some comments. So if I didn't reply right away, I apologize, and I'll check that a little bit more frequently from here on out. I think that's it as far as housekeeping goes. And I don't usually say this on my videos. You know, if you watch a lot of YouTube videos, people will say at the end, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe and all that. I forget to say that on my videos, but of course I would love it if you gave me a thumbs up or left a comment and subscribed. That just helps other people see the video on YouTube. So yeah, so let's go learn how to do the satin stitch. There isn't a whole lot to say about the satin stitch. I probably could even have included it in that week 2 lesson on straight stitches. The satin stitch is a series of straight stitches stitched closely together to fill in a shape. I'm going to demonstrate the satin stitch on this little oval right here. One decision that you need to make before you're stitching in an area is the direction you want your stitches to go. I could choose, in this case, to make my stitches go vertically along the shape or horizontally. I think in this case, I'm going to stitch the stitches going this way, from left to right. Going to bring my needle up from the back at where I want to start stitching, bring it all the way up to the top. And then I am just going to place my needle at the very end of where I'm stitching. So basically the end of the shape. So I'm going to place my needle right there. I like to start in the center and work my way to each of the sides. If I were stitching my stitches in the other direction, I would start here and then stitch from the center to the right and then the center to the left. So the next stitch is just going to be made right next to the first stitch that I did, following the shape. So I'm going to bring my needle back up to where I started, right next to that, and then do another straight stitch. And the key is just to try and be consistent, get your stitches as close together as you can without overlapping the previous stitch. And this just takes practice. It's not a difficult stitch when you describe it, but I find it a little bit harder to make my stitches as neat as I would like. And as my shape kind of gets smaller, then my stitches will also be a little bit shorter in length. So now I'm going to go back on the opposite side of that first stitch that I did and stitch the top part of the shape. So that's the oval shape that I stitched. You can see in this example that after I stitched my satin stitches, I went back and then I outlined my shape with the back stitch. I think it just gives it a nice smooth look, but it depends on the project that you're working on, and again, it's a personal preference. But in this case, I think I'm going to just do a series of back stitches all along the outside. You can also run your needle underneath the long stitches. if you need to smooth them out. That's the satin stitch with the back stitch sort of outlining the shape. The satin stitch can be used anywhere you want to fill in a shape. It doesn't have to be round, doesn't have to be square, it doesn't even have to be symmetrical. You just basically decide which shape you want to fill in and just decide which direction you want your stitches to go. And if it's a larger area, I recommend sort of starting in the center and working your way out to each side. If it's a really big area, you could do a series of parallel straight stitches spaced out evenly, just sort of as a guide, and then fill in those in between those parallel stitches. That's another tip that I have for you. I did the satin stitch here on this pinwheel shape. There's 12 different colors. It's kind of hard to tell. Some of the colors are very close in range, but they are 12 different colors. I chose not to backstitch around each of the petals or spokes, whatever you want to call those shapes of the pinwheel. I just think in this example, the design looks better without the backstitch. But as I mentioned before, that is a personal preference. So practice and experiment and play around with the different shapes on your panel, trying out the satin stitch, and I will see you next week. So in the meantime, happy stitching.